Ashley Solomon, my older brother. Welcome to the lockdown sessions. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brad.
Look, Ash, we were talking just before, and I was just sort of setting it up that part of these podcasts have been about sort of observing what's been happening over the last year in your world. And we've had lots of people come in from different parts of the world in different jobs and roles. You sit as a professional musician, you're director of Florilegium, a Baroque ensemble, and you also a professor at Music College in London, the Royal College. Have you been knighted yet, by the way? Has that happened? No.
That's not going to happen.
Oh, it will soon. I live with hope and faith. Um, Look, as a musician, as someone who spent the last 25 years traveling the world, performing, connecting with audiences, on March the 23rd last year, you were stopped from moving, connecting with your audience. What happened when it all kicked off to a musician who runs an orchestra? So, by the way, you're responsible for like up to 50, 60, sometimes 100 different people.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the first couple of concerts cancelled, and we just thought, well, that'll see us through till April or May. And for musicians who specialise in Baroque music, Easter time is a massive period of music
Right.
because they're all the passions, sort of reflecting the story of Easter that the composers in the 18th century were doing. And so we would always do a huge Matthew Passion at the Royal Festival Hall in London for 2,500 people, with an orchestra of 65 and a choir of 200. And that was scheduled for the end of March, 30th of March.
So 1 week after.
Within a week, that disappeared. So, players, of course, were absolutely distraught. But we thought, well, that's fine because in a few months' time, and the diary is full. We had a busy year because this is last year was the run up to our 30th anniversary, which is this year, 2021.
Right.
So,
Wow, 30 years.
yeah, all told, 48 concerts cancelled and projects cancelled since March last year. And we thought, well, that'll be fine because they'll cancel and run till September, October, and then we'll kickstart the new season.
Right. Off we go again.
And off we go again. And of course, that didn't happen. And very soon it was very clear that promoters were not just scared about, taking the risk on concerts, but they feared audiences wouldn't come. And then, of course, the government intervened
Yeah.
and shut all the venues. And a large part of my work is touring abroad, taking projects to different countries. And one of the major projects last year was a huge tour in Brazil.
Oh,
First time in Brazil. We've done a
would
lot
have
of
been lovely, by the way.
lovely, and it was a 3 week tour, 10 concerts in 3 weeks, taking my choir from Bolivia across to Brazil and flying in Florilegium from London. So it was a huge project that involved 30 odd people. Massive budget, hugely sponsored. And when you look at what's going on out there at the moment, and I'm in touch with my colleagues there,
Yeah.
it's horrendous, and they don't think the arts will ever return because they need to support infrastructure and medical work and research there. So you kiss goodbye to something that was supposed to happen in June, across June and July 2020, but it took 3 years to plan. So I suppose what people don't realise for musicians is that okay, we're cancelling work, and Oliver Dowden, our great minister, says okay, the concerts will come back. You can't press an on button and your diary fills again.
No, 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 no,
Some of
no.
the projects that we've been working on have taken 3 years to build. So pre-pandemic, I had, and so we're talking March 2020, I had dates through to 2023 in the diary. 2020 absolutely wiped out. Most of 2021 wiped out. Because while we may now start attending concerts after, is it May the 17th? Venues are allowed to be open for half capacity. You've got to be a very brave promoter to put on a concert for half capacity. Know that you'll get back your investment, and without further government support, it makes it difficult. So I think people are scared. I think that's the issue. The one saving grace for our 30th anniversary was a weekend of concerts at Wigmore Hall, which by chance, and it was booked 4 years ago, in 2017. We booked this weekend, which is May the 22nd and 23rd.
Okay. So,
Not the 17th.
yeah.
I'm in discussions with the Wigmore about doing this weekend of concerts to celebrate our 30th anniversary. They've said they'll have a 50% capacity. We had to change the program because one of them had 18 people and the stage is too small to socially distance.
Right.
So we are saving something. It won't be streamed, it will be live. So, like the old days.
Yeah. I bet you can't wait.
Buy a ticket and turn up. And, the full were saying, well, I'm sorry, we won't stream it if we're doing live. And I said, no, actually, I'm delighted to feel that we will have, even a 50% audience at
Yeah.
the concert to celebrate with us. So for musicians all over the world, it's been devastating, absolutely devastating, because it's not a matter that your diary will refill. Anyone who's been in the business as long as I have knows that it takes 3 years. So,
Look, I hear you. I remember in March where all of the workshops I was involved with, which would sometimes have been planned for 6 months in advance, were just cancelled. But it's easier to put those back in because you can find another 3-hour slot for one person to turn up virtually and deliver. So anything that went off came back on. There was a period where everybody wasn't sure what was going on, so they stopped. But what you're talking about is your stuff requires planning. Actually, every event will have everything from marketing to comms to the practice required to pulling the team together that's going to deliver on it. I mean, you can't just say, "Oh, we'll do it next Thursday," because it doesn't work like that in your world.
and not just that, the group is made up of international people who aren't all based in London. So, let alone UK,
Yeah.
the first who's back in America. I've got a colleague who's stuck in Spain, one in Portugal, knowing that if they come over, they've got to come over for 2 weeks quarantine before they're allowed to get out and move around.
Yeah.
So there are certain practical issues which need to be addressed. Not just that, so many players haven't played for a year.
Yeah, what's that been like? How have you stayed? Because you teach as well, right? So you've always got an instrument in your hand, right?
Yes, although teaching online is incredibly frustrating. I mean, I'm at the Royal College of Music as head of historical performance, and so I look after a whole faculty of students. And so our primary concern when the students went back to their 60 odd countries was to stay in touch with them and learn a new
Right.
skill of working. And Zoom, Teams, WhatsApp, FaceTime, all these things are fine, but you cannot play together. Like if we try to talk together at the same time,
Yeah,
oops,
the lag.
it wouldn't work. So in music, it's about communication and quality of sound at tertiary level. And you don't get that through a computer. You can, improve the quality and you can use microphones and headphones and some software. But what it won't allow me to do is play along with my student when I'm teaching or play
Right.
along with a colleague if we want to, put something on online. And so that meant you had to readjust your entire way of teaching and looking for sort of motivation, inspiration, not just for myself, but for the students. So that was another layer that was
Yeah.
complicated. But for professional musicians who aren't fortunate enough to have a teaching post, who are dependent on, um, playing for lots of groups and filling their diary with working for lots of groups, suddenly when all that work disappeared, there was no reason to get their instrument out of the case. There was no reason to practice. There was no reason to think about, you know, what repertoire do I need to learn for the next 3 weeks or month or 6 months? Because in fact, everything just wiped out the diary. It's just snow blindness when you opened your diary. There was nothing there.
Yeah.
So the motivation was really challenging. And for performing musicians, you realize, and I realized very quickly, that I'm completely addicted to adrenaline.
Right. The feeling you
And I
get
need
when you're
that.
on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no way of replicating that in a chat. As much as I'd love to have the adrenaline rush, Brad, talking to you, it's not the same.
No, it's not. No, standing in front of a group of 200 people talking about leadership is incredible for me. Standing on Zoom and talking to 200 people, I find inspiring, but I don't have that rush of adrenaline, is what you're talking about. So what do they do for a year?
So some are fortunate enough to sort of have help from the government. Others have retrained and learned new skills and set themselves up as different professionals. And if you've been in the business 30 years, I don't know what else I would do. Certainly, I'm an expert in my field, but not in any other field.
No, right.
So for me, I realized that what I needed was motivation and fix of adrenaline, and I wasn't getting that through teaching online. So I decided that actually what would get me practicing is to put on some concerts from home. And Sarah, my wife, said, well, that you should record these and release these on Facebook and whatever, and YouTube, and let people watch it whenever. And I said, actually, what I'm missing is the live element of the concert. And a lot of my friends and colleagues, and I think you mentioned it to me as well. Well, can I come up later? And I'm going, actually, no, because what I'm going to do is imagine that I'm giving a concert at Wigmore Hall.
Yeah.
That's a great venue in London, the Wigmore Hall. And over the years, I think I've given 85 recitals there. So it's the one I know the most, and I know what I feel like when I'm there on the approach to the concert, the rehearsal just before, preparing program notes, which I do. And so I thought, okay, I'll take this format and set up at home a Zoom concert, which is by invitation only. At the time, we did that because I was worried about being bombed, and there was a lot of
there were security challenges, weren't there?
So I thought, okay, well, it'll be invitation only. There are lots of friends of Florrie, lots of colleagues of my students, and I thought, we'll invite them personally, so they get a personal invitation to me from me for the concert. I plan the program, I write the program notes, which get sent out a few days in advance, so people can print them up, read them in advance, ignore them, doesn't matter. And then the format of the concert was the doors open at 7. There's a sort of PowerPoint presentation and slides talking about the program for people to watch if they arrive early. And at 7:15, the concert starts. There's a bit of introduction from me, so I'm talking to the audience. Okay, I had a live audience because the girls were around, my daughters and Sarah, and sometimes my mother-in-law came to watch. So we had, up to 5 or 6 people and the dog to watch it live. And at the end of the concert, there was then a Q&A. So people either posted questions or came on and asked questions.
I like that, by the way. I posed a question as well. I remember in I think the second concert that you did. I quite like that touch, actually. It wasn't just streaming a concert where we're passive as an audience. You got us to engage. I've seen you perform on stage. You talk to your audience, actually. So I can really understand why you would have missed it.
And that meant that well, it did me the world of good. It meant I practiced. I practiced really hard for these concerts because I was playing alone, solo.
Right.
I mean, as it's developed, so I introduced 1 or 2 colleagues, and so we had some duo concerts together, 2 or 3 of those. And in fact, one of them was even a co-share with my colleague in America who couldn't get over and was supposed to be in London. So she and I shared the concert, and she was in in Massachusetts, and I was in London, and we set up, and the Q&A happened, and it worked very well. We couldn't play together, but we each had a solo slot.
David Bowie and Mick Jagger did that in 1985 at Live Aid, so I think you guys can do it now. I think that's absolutely fine.
And they're not professional concerts, and they're very homespun. But the feedback I got from up to what do we have, 300 or 400 people maximum tuning in, was that they actually loved the personal element, the fact that I was in my home, that the dog came in on camera sometimes,
very cute,
at the door, that they discovered new music. I could share lots of my instruments and play lots of instruments. And the Q&A meant that they could ask literally anything, and people did. They were asking about motivation, how I plan programs, about the instruments, about students, about the family. And there were, for 15 minutes afterwards, and we decided that some of the concerts should raise money. So 3 of them were dedicated to raising money for Women's Aid. Because as soon as the first lockdown came down, I was reading some horrendous articles in the paper about domestic violence.
Hideous.
I need to do something, so I got in touch with Women's Aid, and we raised several £1,000s for them through.
Amazing.
You don't buy tickets; people can donate if they choose to. There's no, there is no ticket, so people aren't expected to pay to view. But we ask for donations for the charitable causes that I was raising money for, and we did 8 or I speak like the group. I mean, I did 8 or 9 of these concerts, and really enjoyed it, and had tech support from Izzy especially, and enjoyed it. And now we're going back into live concerts, and sort of I can see the tiny speckle of light at the end of the tunnel, because there are a few concerts coming into the diary, and now for 2022 promoters are being a bit more positive about what is possible.
Well, you see what they did in Barcelona last week, where they tested with 5,000 people masked up, but all with those rapid flow tests beforehand. And they had 5,000 of them, no social distancing, all enjoying live, and it looked amazing.
It'd be interesting to see what happens to the figures.
Right, yeah, and that's really the point, right? Because as soon as people start getting together, the numbers go up, and then it's like, what happens then? How have you? No, that's not the right question. As someone who has led a group for so long, did you feel a sense of responsibility towards your players and your choralists, and I don't know if that's the word actually, that you weren't providing them with their income?
A really good question, Brad. Wow. Yes. So I've been part of an organisation that set up a foundation called the Continuo Foundation to raise money specifically for people specialising in historical performance. And I was asked by one of the friends of Florrie, who's been really supportive of my work for years. This was her inspiration completely, and she just wanted some advice. And so I got her patrons together, which included Dame Emma Kirkby, Sir Roger Norrington, and Rachel Podger. And then there are a list of trustees. And she's already raised £150,000 and dispersed this money to 23 ensembles for innovative programs to get groups up and running again.
Wow.
So yes, it's a huge responsibility. And when I worked out that we would have paid fees to 340 musicians over the year.
It's a lot of people.
A lot of people. And these people have had nothing. So I do feel a responsibility. At the same time, it's been really hard to keep the group, running.
Mm.
I've cut back on all my admin. I still have Valeria, my administrator.
Yeah.
Total, but we have to keep our name out there. You have to continue to, otherwise you disappear without a trace.
No, and today in the world of social proof, if you're not visible, you're actually, unfortunately, it's shallow, but you're not anything. And it's totally saturated out there, right?
So what is exciting, I think, for the new generation, and what I'm excited about for the students coming through and the students who sort of graduated through our school in the last couple of years, is they've got lots of brilliant ideas of how to move forward with careers. No, it won't be the same as, when we started, we'd tour up and down the country playing for peanuts just to get concerts.
I remember those days when you used to get home at 1 a.m. after driving back from Canterbury.
Yeah, exactly. Or even further afield, and those opportunities won't be there for the new generation.
Right. No.
Because a lot of these music societies have folded. I mean, they're run by people of a certain age,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a sexy business to go into because if you run a concert series and say you put on 10 concerts a year, you probably have 800 or 900 applicants for those 10 concerts.
Wow.
So who wants to do it? You've got to be retired to want to do it because you've not got time to manage something.
You can't go through that.
And with government cutting back the support of the arts, a lot of these small societies have simply folded. So they can't do that, but they're looking at, they're reimagining what the music business will be like for the next 10, 15 years. And of course, streaming has become part of that. And now it is extraordinary what people are doing. I mean, initially you'd see on YouTube these clever short performances of one person playing 10 different parts.
Right, yeah.
Gluing it together. And part of my concert series was to rally against that because I thought, well, that's kind of not exactly
digital. It's digital. It's digital.
What I'm trying to do, and I shouldn't be a snob, but at the same time, it's not what I want to do. But the younger generation have found, fantastic ways of communicating music and text, and so much so, and they have the tenacity and the sheer drive that us old crusties don't have in the way that we did 30 years ago. So on Saturday, which will be Easter Saturday, I don't know when this is going out, but we recorded a Matthew Passion, single strings, single voices, with the daughter of my dear colleague Terry Charleston, who I've been playing with for over 30 years, who's a singer. Wow. And she's carrying the mantle forward, and got a whole team of cameramen and sound engineers at St John Smith Square, and socially distanced across 3 days. And we recorded St Matthew Passion. and so that's going to be broadcast.
Cool.
You know, good for them. She's provided a program. It was clever because everyone who played, and there were 30 odd in the project, had to write why they wanted to play the Matthew Passion again. So it wasn't a sort of academic essay on the Matthew Passion, which you can, you know, go to
Yeah.
book on my shelf and read it. But it was a personal insight, and I think they're realizing people are interested in this personal insight and what drives musicians to take these risks with projects
Yeah.
that they really want to do. So I'm quite hopeful for the new generation that there will be, you know, a different sort of career for them, but it will be, you know, as rewarding as ours, but just in a different, with different priorities.
Yeah. It looks different, doesn't it? The world now, anyway. And I think we're being more of a hybrid place for a while, where streaming and recording and live, they'll have to work together before people are all comfortable just to go back into one space.
And actually, we're doing some projects with the Association for European Conservatoires. I'm on a think tank for them, and they realise now that we don't have to travel across Europe to have a meeting.
No,
You know, actually, these meetings are so much more successful online
right.
because, you know, 10 or 20 times as many people will attend.
Mm.
You know, and you can give people a 15-minute slot, and you don't feel you've travelled to, you know, Zagreb to give a 15-minute paper.
Right.
You can do it from home. And I've tuned into so many conferences and lectures that I otherwise simply couldn't get to if they were in person. So that's a real positive. And, you know,
But you missed a connection then.
so exactly. So, you know, you start having coffee mornings, don't you?
Yeah.
Where you have breakout groups where you can chat informally. Of course, it's not the same as being in person.
No, but it's all we have. So,
Exactly. And that's better than nothing. The fear is what it's like when we actually meet people face to
oh
face.
my God, we'll have to be retaught how to communicate in person.
Of course, because what you want to do is you want an outpouring of everything, and you realise actually that there's nothing to say because nobody's done anything for you.
Well, and actually, I've been speaking to my friends so regularly, I don't actually need to see them because we've been talking every week. I haven't got anything to share with them. But here's a different perspective. You're also a dad. You've mentioned the girls. You had 3 in the house for some of the lockdown. You had 4 at some point. Then you're down to 2, and you've got teenage girls living in the house. What was it like trying to sustain your teaching online, keeping connected with the music, but you've also got school going kids? I mean, every story I've heard about homeschooling or the back and forth to school and the positive test from this person in the class, they're all a nightmare. So please have some nightmarish stories to share or have some positive things.
I mean, the worst thing is for Molly and Izzy, numbers 2 and 3 out of our 4 missed A levels and GCSEs, and both of them really wanted to do them. I mean,
Yeah.
bright girls, they prepared well, and they felt completely cheated. So, you know, Molly left school in a really weird way. Um, you know,
Yeah.
so that was bizarre. What was super hard, I suppose, for our youngest Jemima, who was in year 7 at the start, which is, you know, the first year in secondary school, is this idea that online school and homework that was set. What is the difference between homework and schoolwork? And the school took some time to adjust and understand that at big schools with, you know, 2,000 kids across
Yeah.
the whole school, so 300 per year. And, you know, our kids were lucky; they had a space and, you know, equipment in order to learn.
Yeah.
But it was the fact that, okay, when stuff was online and you had to do it, for Jemima, our youngest, we had to say, okay, schoolwork in the morning, and then you have the afternoon free to do what you like. What they missed more than anything was just this feeling of communication with their friends.
Yeah.
That was
Right.
really hard to manage. Let alone, look, they'll catch up if they're given enough time. But, you know, both Sarah and I were working full time and trying to manage all sorts of other expectations and look after what was going on. I think we were lucky. I think the girls managed remarkably well. I think it was incredibly helpful that the weather was fantastic from March through to the summer, where, you know, they could get out of the house
Yeah.
every afternoon, you know, and having a dog helped because it was a
Of
great
course.
go for a walk.
Ready-made excuse to get out.
Have they gone backwards in their education? Yes, probably, but I think everybody has, and I think the government is now looking at how we assess through public exams and what we're looking to assess and whether we need to assess. Because if you're talking
Right.
about a holistic education, is it all about performing well in an exam? Probably not.
No.
And I think the knock-on effect is going to be dramatic. I think it's harder probably for those who are starting university, where university isn't what it was when we started, that whole university life. So a lot of people deferred for a year, thinking get back to normal. Then I'm afraid this year, bang, you had one term, and then you were back in lockdown. So I think it's miserable for a
As
lot of
you
people.
know, we've got 2 university students living in this house. Both were down here for the first 4 months. Then Oliver, I think, missed his girlfriend actually, so went back to Sheffield and bubbled up with her. Her mum was NHS staff, so we felt safe. Charlotte was joining university this year, and I feel so sad for her experience this year. She's on a film course, and yes, now they're back, so they're at least interacting. But for the first 6 months, she was sat in her bedroom on the laptop doing her lessons and making films, which you just can't do. I know from my next door neighbors that when the day the kids went back to school last week, on that Monday evening, the boys were out in the garden on the trampoline for about 5 hours. I spoke to their dad, who's a paramedic, and he said to me that they're deranged. They're so happy to have seen their friends. They're just literally bouncing off the walls. So he put the trampoline out and just told them to go out into the garden.
I mean, the difficulty to explain to younger kids, and I'm talking about years 7, 8, 9, etc., is that they travel on the bus to school together, they're in class together, and yet they can't see each other.
Right.
And that was really hard. Why can't we see each other? Why can't? Well, because you can't. You can see one friend, you can go for a walk, but they can't come in the garden. They can now, and I think that was really hard. And I think they actually, found that unfathomable, because
Yeah.
every day they were back at school from March the 8th. They didn't understand. They were in the playground together. They were playing together, and yet, at home time they couldn't do that.
Right.
I think that's been challenging, and the girls have had times when they've just been sad. That's what they've said. We feel sad today, and they can't explain why they feel sad. But it's something that is gut wrenching as a parent to have a child say that when they're blessed to have a lot of things at their disposal,
Right.
and it then puts in perspective so many others, families.
First world problems, Ash. First world problems.
So I think we were incredibly lucky with the first lockdown and through this year. Sarah and I both had jobs. Okay, I lost half of my work, and probably the most enjoyable part of my work, which is the playing element. But I had a teaching position, which meant I had a purpose and a reason to get up and try and inspire however you can on Zoom, and people have got their letters on and not even their cameras. So now I refuse to teach unless everybody's on camera, because I don't need to think that my students are in bed or asleep or not even in the room.
Listen, I once during lockdown, I ran a workshop for a client on motivation, actually, and it was for a group of apprentices. And I invited everyone to turn their cameras on, and one of them was still in bed, bare shoulders, with the duvet up to her neck. And I asked her, I asked her to turn her camera off, and then private messaged her and said, "Please, could I invite you to put some clothes on and then come to the session?" But she's, 17, and actually, she hadn't even considered the professionalism of what that could look like in doing that.
Because I mean, this is all new to all of us. I mean, an interesting element, I suppose, that's been positive is the way we now communicate, or I communicate with my colleagues. I look after about 40 professors under me at the Royal College, and there are about 120 students or so I I see on a regular basis. And so we realized that we use Teams through our organization because
Yeah.
I mean IT support for it. But I realized that actually what we miss also is when we do concerts at college, we go to the pub and have a chat, an informal chat with the students. So we started a series this term called Ask Me Anything, where we just have an hour on Zoom on a Friday from 6 till 7. People are encouraged to have a drink in their hand if they want to. It doesn't have to be gin and tonic, it can be cocoa or a glass of wine. And one of my profs come on every week, and I'm there to moderate, and the students can ask them anything.
Brilliant.
And
Fireside chat with a professor.
yeah, and the idea is that you're only allowed on if your camera is there, because you wouldn't go to the pub and leave your face behind. You go to the pub and
Yeah.
you face to face, and that's garnered some wonderful communications between students and profs, and built up a sort of community among the students and among the profs. So they've got to know the profs and know that one of my professors, for example, is a very well-known violinist. All the work was cancelled, so she's now a delivery driver for Waitrose
No way.
because she thought I actually need to get out and do something and not stay at home doing nothing.
Yeah.
So she featured in the Guardian.
I love that.
Articles about what people have been doing in lockdown, and she says she loves it, and she thinks she will probably carry on doing that in combination with her music career, because she doesn't think it will ever come back to how it was, where she was doing 120 concerts a year.
Right. Yeah, I love stories like that. One of the guys in our village lost his job very early on and became an Amazon driver. And he said actually he's really enjoyed the driving. He
Yeah,
liked earning, and he'll do more hours. So actually, he earned not shy of what he would have. He was working more hours, but he wasn't shy of what he would have earned had he kept his job. And he's now going to set up in his own business and do some kind of logistics firm, So I love those kinds of stories because that shows me that actually, as human beings, we're far more resilient than we think we are. I've been amazed at, when I think about our parents and how they've actually been inside their flat literally for 13 months now, and how they haven't killed each other is incredible. But they've focused and they've planned, and dad as a ex sort of chartered accountant is all about planning, so they plan. Everybody's found their own way of coping, and it sounds as though that you have as well. How do you help your audiences feel safe? So psychological safety in my world, in the corporate world, is all about now, how do we get people back into an office, get them commuting, because that's actually the fear. Being in the office is less the fear. Coming together for things. So to create psychological safety means you've got to make the space for people to feel comfortable to share what they're worried about. And how do you do that in a world where your audience, you don't speak to them every day? You don't. How can you do that?
Gosh. So I suppose part of going back to live performance will depend on the venues where the concerts are taking place and how safe they are. So the sort of venues we play at, uh, Wigmore Hall, for example, or Festival Hall, they're huge organisations, and they have been managing this and will know how to do it. How you convince an audience to come back to hear live music, it's almost impossible to know, because now at the flick of a switch you can watch an opera from the Met in New York without leaving the comfort of your room.
Yeah.
And some people, that is enough. And some of the emails I got after my Zoom concerts were from people who said, we're not sure we'll ever go back to a live concert because we're just too scared. Because it's not sitting in the Wigmore Hall, for example, it's getting there on the
Right.
tube.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
having something to eat somewhere beforehand. It's using the facilities. It's
Right.
going home on the tube. So it's, I suppose society as a whole has got to feel protected,
Mhm.
and that people are responsible. And let's face it, if you go on the tube, and I go into college, as soon as we were allowed, I go in twice a week and do lateral flows on the way into college. And that's fine, because I go to Mallet Street to University of London to have my lateral flow test. Then I get on the tube from there, and I spend my life changing carriages because people are sitting on the tube wearing masks under their chin.
Yeah. Well, that's like wearing boxer shorts halfway down your legs, right?
Exactly. And those memes went round, and I'd like to point that out, but actually I tried it once and had so much abuse. I thought, you know what, it's much simpler just to change carriage.
Yeah.
So I do that. So why would people feel secure if others are so irresponsible?
Yeah.
So in a way, it's not how I can get the audience back; it's how people feel comfortable getting to venues. So if everyone could drive in their own car to a venue, park, and get there, then I suppose that's one way. I think it will change the demographic of our audience. I mean, when I look out, um, for example, at Wigmore Hall, there is a sea of white hair.
Right.
And I've always said to the Wigmore, how are you going to bring in youngsters? Because that's the future of music culture. And I think this actual pandemic has made that change because I've got lots of younger people who are desperate for some culture and desperate for live event. In a way, it doesn't matter what's being played; they want the live event.
Yeah. 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 I hear
So I
you.
mean, you could have a pop concert with B-rate pop artists. It wouldn't stop people from going because they want that experience. So I
Right.
suppose that will change initially for the first year or two because that gimmick, that sense of excitement of going somewhere live, like the concert in Spain that you mentioned, they had no problem selling 5,000 tickets. The BBC Proms have just announced they are launching live concerts from end of July through to September. The BBC Proms will run. They've not announced how many of the 6,000 seats they'll sell,
Yeah.
and they probably can't have promenaders there unless they introduce this, immediate lateral flow tests, and you wait 30 minutes before you find out whether you can enter or not. I mean, I don't know, but I think there's enough of an appetite, I hope, for culture to return. But I don't think it will necessarily have anything to do with what I can do to my
No,
audience because it's an
the
individual thing.
the influence is on the individual. That's the challenge because everybody's got their own take on it. I I live in a village, as you know, and a couple of months back, 4 or 5 months ago, I was in just our village shop, and about 5 teens walked in, non-masked, obviously, all really close together, bundling around each other in the shop, picking everything up and putting it down. And I actually had to say something. I've become a grumpy old man, but I am there in my mask. I am distancing, and these boys are bumping in and they're pulling things down from the shelf and then picking it up and throwing things. And I said to the guy sort of standing behind the counter, "Is this every day?" And she said, "I've got to the point where even with a big sign on the front door, you must wear a mask, people don't." And so there's just conspiracy theorists around. I think we're going to have the same reaction. I'm fearful that we'll have the same reaction that we had like with Brexit. So you were either Brexit or you were against it, right? And now we're going to have mask or non-mask, vaccine or anti-vaccine, and the lines are going to be drawn. And I wonder whether we'll get to a point where you won't be able to go into the Royal Albert Hall for a concert unless you've got a vaccine certificate to say you've been vaccinated. So then we're going to start discriminating against people who can actually come in and watch concerts.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the landscape looks very uncertain and complex.
It is. It's complex, and I suppose, and different countries are having different rules and regulations. So if you're a global artist or a worker who travels around a lot, you're going to be playing lots of different games with lots of different countries in order to sustain something. And then maybe the question is, do we need that anymore? Should we be looking? I mean, from the musician's perspective, should we be looking more to sort of have fertile ground at home than pastors new abroad? Because as hard as it is for me to get across to Germany to do my next project, which I'm waiting to do, my colleagues in Germany can't come over to the UK.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem.
So, and this is irrespective of Brexit. This is, just COVID. So, we've got a double whammy. We've got COVID and Brexit
No.
for work abroad. And, that landscape is shifting all the time, and which means it's impossible to plan.
And that's what unites every single person trying to run some sort of business right now, whether you're a big international global corp or whether you're a sole trader running a business. You can't plan for more than 3 months, and that makes it so hard. That for me, that's a challenge because what work I do, and I could see workshops not really coming back. Yes, we booked one now for November, an in-house, in-person. Yeah, with celebrations all around, 3 days at Ashridge. on a leadership program. I've mentioned it to anyone who'll listen. I'm so excited about it. But everyone coming for this European program would have been double vaccinated by then. And it's in a location where we have open doors to a forest. So it's a medical company, mask, social distancing, PPE. It feels very safe.
Yeah.
But most of the rooms I run workshops in, often in offices, are corner rooms, limited windows, cramped, confined space. They're not going to happen. We're not going to be flying people from all over the world into one hotel location to sit in a room downstairs with no windows all day to talk about a topic we can do online. So I think everyone's in that same boat. It's on everybody else. It's going to take time.
We shall see. We shall see. I mean, the interesting thing is the sort of work that you're doing, where you've shown how successful it can be online. You miss the physical, the smell of people in the room.
Right.
But it's still possible to function.
Yes, and operate. Yeah, for sure.
Whereas unless musicians are in the same room together, they simply can't play.
No.
That can't be done online. Yeah, you can have meetings online, you can chat online.
No,
you can't physically play music online. And I suppose that's the issue for us musicians.
Well, and on Sunday just gone, our mum was on the phone to me and complaining that she can't play along with her pupils. And I was going, I can't believe this. So we were on WhatsApp video, FaceTime video, and on Zoom. And I went upstairs to the keyboard and we tried to just play together. And it's impossible because you can't actually hear what you're playing and hear what they're playing and distinguish it as being played at the same time. It's just off in how we hear it, which just makes it impossible. So
I know. There is one system called Lola, which we've used for 10 years at the RCM, at the Royal College, which is an incredibly fast internet speed. And what we've done is we've had 4 institutions around the globe. So Yale University, Sydney Conservatorium, and the Oslo Conservatory of Music, and the Royal College of Music. And we've had quartets playing with 1 student in each of these institutions. 3 monitors sat on seats where the other musicians would be.
Right.
And the kids have played live, and it's worked. But you need a multi-million-pound investment in this system in order to make it work, which is totally impractical.
Right.
Other than an educational institution, which is sort of test driving this software.
Or if you're Gary Barlow from Take That and you're doing crooner sessions with famous musicians from all over the world, and you've probably got that kind of software at home where you can set that up and sing together.
Then it works. So it is absolutely impossible as you experienced. I mean, as far as my mum is concerned, our mum is concerned, I said eventually you can go to people's houses and play. You have to want to do it, and that's the point we're making, isn't it? It's the personal choice of deciding at what level do you take this risk, if there's a risk, of going to someone else's house. And I can deliver classes at college, and I did the whole from September through to December, socially distanced. Everyone was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
The issue is sustaining that focus and that attention to detail so that we have a safe space. Because ultimately, the goal of playing music together for us is worth that sacrifice.
Yeah. And I imagine even a socially distant orchestra would look visually quite awkward.
It's not what it was, but that doesn't mean this can't be the new norm if it has to be.
Yeah.
We're seeing it on the continent, and we're seeing it everywhere. It means that sometimes auditoriums are empty because the orchestra spills into the stalls where people would sit.
Yeah.
And so you have reduced seating, and the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam are doing that, where they're taking out seats on the floor and having the orchestra spill into the floor, and then having people in the balcony,
right,
to watch a live concert, and then everything is socially distanced.
My hope is that in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll just start to forget about all the pain, and we'll just get more used to doing those things again. And once we have a kind of, whether it's a herd immunity, or we realize that once everyone is vaccinated, it is a flu-like illness, and even if you get it, you've just got COVID, you'll be okay. It will shift, but the world is at such different stages. I know one of the last questions I had on my notes before we came onto this was I really wanted to touch on Bolivia, because it's one of the elements I celebrate about you when I talk of you to people in my world. But I wondered, as a country, you actually were influential in changing how that entire nation embraces classical music, particularly within the Baroque field. And you touched on them just gently earlier when you talked about bringing them over into Brazil. They're not the wealthiest of nations. I know you have a strong affinity to them, and all the various presidents. But how are your friends there, and what have they been doing? Because I think of them often when I think of you and them.
Yeah, I mean, Bolivia's been part of my life for 20 years since I
Right.
started there in 1992. I first went out. Not 1992, sorry, 2002. They're struggling. They're really struggling. They're not sure what sort of vaccine they're going to get. My friends out there are saying, the Sputnik one is coming over from Russia because it's cheap, and the Chinese one's coming. They're not sure whether they want to have it, but at the
Right.
same time, they don't have a choice. It's basic things, things we don't even consider. So, for example, communities exist in Bolivia without refrigerators because they go every day to the market and buy the food they need to cook, take it home, cook, and then the next day they do the same thing. That's part of their culture.
Mm.
They can't buy a week's supply of food, store it the way we can,
Mm-hmm.
but they're having to go out every day, and with that comes all sorts of potential dangers.
Yeah.
So there are issues. The people I work with are sort of that are involved in music are safe. They're safe and well. They're frustrated because singing and playing is part of what they do every day.
Mm.
And they're longing. In fact, I just had some WhatsApp messages a couple of weeks ago for my birthday from a lot of friends in my choir out there saying, when are you coming? When can we plan? What is the future holding for us?
Yeah.
Because we spoke about recordings and we spoke about all sorts of projects. We are planning in 2022 to have a festival that's every 2 years. And I've been given the dates and we've even planned a program, but that's April 2022. And there'll have to be a lot of changes out there before it's viable for me to go out.
Yeah.
The jetting I used to do where I'd go 3 or 4 times a year to prepare for the concert. If it's 2 weeks quarantine at both sides, that's absolutely impossible.
Well, it is absolutely impossible. Anywhere I would want to go for work would require me to then stay at home for 2 weeks afterwards, which means I can't do anything else. So unless they were paying shed loads of money to allow me to then quarantine for 2 weeks, it's not viable.
Yep. So I look fondly back at those 20 years of work in Bolivia and those, I don't know, more than 100 trips and connections I made with so many people. And, that really fed my soul and it did a lot of good for a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
And there will be a way of working together in the future, but I just have no idea how that is going to look and how we will be able to work. And, the luxury of time together is not going to be the same. Plus I don't fancy getting on planes for 20 hours to get out to Bolivia.
It's funny, isn't it? I'm quite comfortable doing say a 2.5 hour trip to short haul to Europe. I could do that, vaccine tested, etc. I do a lot of work in Asia, and I'm not ready yet to sit 14 hours on a plane to sing, unless I'm being given a bed where I can put up my, and then I have no problem doing it. But
we always travel to Singapore, Brad.
Yeah, of course. I'll make sure these clients don't get the link to this one. And what about sort of the summer, just for you and the family? When you look at it together, you talked about kind of actually you felt fortunate because of the way you're set up. Have you got a chance to get away, to actually get a different set of sceneries in front of you, or are you still all home based?
So two of the 4 girls are in Israel, so we'd love to go out there as soon as we can. I was supposed to, as soon as Hannah, our eldest, went out to Israel, I started developing and nurturing my contacts in Israel. So I had 3 concert tours planned for 2020.
Oh, shame.
December. and of course they all disappeared. So I will start that again when I can to get out there, and we'd love to go, and see Molly and Hannah in the summer. If we can, Sarah and I will be vaccinated. The younger two won't be. But it depends on what the rules and regulations are in Israel as to whether we can do that.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, actually, of all the countries in the world, if there was going to be a vaccination corridor where you wouldn't be required to quarantine. If you look at the two countries in the world that are streets ahead of everybody else, it's Israel and the UK on vaccines. So I could imagine a time in the next 3 months when I know they've got some trouble with the elections again, no outright winner. So I don't know who's making the rules. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is a window, because I think Israel are almost completed their 9 million people, haven't they?
Yeah, yes, they have done that already. And in fact, when Molly went back to Israel last week, she didn't have to quarantine because she had a certificate that showed she'd had both vaccines over 3
Right.
months.
And she's a teen, having had both.
You're right. I think that's possible. So ideally, that's what we'd like to do. We're hanging on for that. We're certainly not going to book anything in the UK in case we suddenly can get to Israel and then we find
right. Well, and actually, I've been looking at the UK, and I don't, I appreciate that people haven't been able to book business for a year, but the prices to stay in places in the UK far outweighs the actual what you're getting for your buck.
It's absolutely eye-watering. I love gardening. We've been working in the garden for a year, and I'm happy to sit here and enjoy the garden if the weather is good, and wait for our sort of corridor to Israel to open.
I love it. Ashley, thank you so much for joining these lockdown. It's going to be the last couple of sessions are going to be cool because it's all been people I've worked with over the last 10 years that I've had on these shows. I've not had family and friends, and now it's really nice. So I've got you on. I'm going to have mum and dad come on for the last ever episode. They're going to come and talk. I don't know whether I need to prime them on some of their stories. And I even got Alessandro over from Ibiza the other day to come on and talk about what it's been like locked down in Ibiza. So I had my best mate as well. So it's just really nice to have you here. And I'll click you in the link so you can also share it with others if you want to.
Will do. Thanks, Brad. Thanks.
Brilliant. Ash, that was cool. Thank you.